All right. Hello. I'm Gil Shear, and this is Kabbalah Explained Simply, where we try to explain deep, profound Kabbalistic concepts simply. And today we're going to delve into a really interesting topic. A lot of questions around this topic about freedom of will. Do we even have it? Did you choose to click YouTube now and go into this session and keep watching, or did you not? We're going to find that out today, but let's just make sure that we have good sound and good video. So if someone can please type in the chat over here that you can hear okay and that you can see okay. That will be great, and then we can keep moving forward. Just until I get a response, there's a slight delay. So until then, I'll also ask that you write where you're from and your name. For example, Ida already started. Ida says hi from Portugal. Hi, Ida. And Mary from Old Fort, North Carolina. And R.A. from Portland. And Francisco from Brazil, Isa from Spain, Jessica from Ireland. Great. Okay, loud and clear. Great. Sound is good. On YouTube, let's just make sure. Yep, thanks, Thomas. So we're good on Facebook as well. Excellent. So you can hear okay, you can see okay. All right. So please keep writing where you're from. I won't read everything, but you should while you're watching. I think it's inspiring to see so many people from all walks of life, from all ages, genders, nationalities, countries, all together studying, connecting around different Kabbalistic topics about different meaningful questions. I think it's beautiful. Yes, and it's still going. That's great. Hi, Lara from Portugal. And hi, Sagar. Not sure where you're from, Sagar. Maybe you can say. Hi, Mary from Boston, and Javier from Oregon, and Isabel from Portugal, and Matana from TN, maybe Tennessee, sorry. David from Germany, Robert from the UK, Mitlesh from India, Nadia from the UK. Keep going. Pilar from Mexico, keep going, it's awesome. Okay, so I guess we can get started in the meantime. Melody from Charlotte. Hi, Melody. Good to have you here again. So welcome to Kabbalah Explained Simply. Today's topic, let me just show you the image of it. Do we have free will? Kabbalah says no, but. Dramatic. Actually, Kabbalah says yes, but science says no. So the session should be called, Do We Have Free Will? Kabbalah, science says no, but Kabbalah says ... So that's actually a topic of the session today. We're going to find out an answer to a question that people have been asking for thousands of years. It raises a lot of moral questions too. Think about it. If we don't have free will, then can we be held accountable for our actions? Many people have fought. Thousands, millions have died in wars for this so-called freedom, and what have they died for? But today we're gonna touch upon this this topic from a lot of different angles. We're gonna look at the science about free will. We're gonna delve into an article of Kabbalist Baal HaSulam, who wrote it almost 100 years ago, and it's actually quite interesting to see how many of the scientific findings we'll talk about from recent years. Baal HaSulam wrote about 100 years ago. As a Kabbalist, he has an understanding of the entire system, and that's where he writes from. We're also going to learn a trick to get kids to eat carrots and drink milk and enjoy it while they're doing it. You might be thinking, how has this have any kind of relation to freedom of choice or to Kabbalah? But I assure you it does. So you're going to learn that trick, and that trick can probably be duplicated not just for carrots and milk, but maybe for other things as well, for other health foods, and maybe even from getting them to do their homework. Who knows? I'm sure that when we get to it, you'll understand and you'll also have some cool ideas. So that's what we're going to do today. So feel free to ask questions in the chat. We have Rachel and Ruth that are with you in the chat, supporting, posting links, answering any technical questions you might have. So thank you, Rachel, and thank you, Ruth. And let's get into it. So I want to start off with a little bit of science. Don't worry, we're not going to get too sciencey. Sorry. Okay. So we want to ask this question: do we have free will, right? So, like I said, according to recent scientific findings, the answer is actually no, we don't. And let's see. So what we're looking at now is an article posted in the scientific journal Nature. It's the most prestigious scientific journal probably of all times, for hundreds of years, actually. So if it's in science, then you know it's valid. So the headline is "Brain Makes Decisions Before You Even Know It." Brain activity predicts decisions before they are consciously made. It's quite fascinating. I'm going to read a little bit of it, not a lot. Let's read it together. Okay, so it says this: your brain makes up its mind up to 10 seconds before you realize it, according to researchers. By looking at brain activity while making a decision, the researchers could predict what choice people would make before they themselves were even aware of having made a decision. So let's keep reading. The work calls into question the consciousness of our decisions and may even challenge ideas about how free we are to make a choice at a particular point in time. We think our decisions are conscious, but these data show that consciousness is just the tip of the iceberg, says John Dylan Hines, a neuroscientist at the Max Planck Institute, etc., who led the study. The results are quite dramatic, he says, and 10 seconds is a lifetime in terms of brain activity, he adds. So basically, in the experiment, people had to choose between pressing 2 random buttons, and they were able to detect before a person identified a conscious decision, they knew what he was going to click almost 10 seconds before he actually clicked it. So just by mapping out his brain while doing this experiment, they were able to know before the person knew what they were going to choose. And this is groundbreaking. It was actually replicated of an experiment from the 80s, but then there was still question if the experiment was done properly, and here today there is no question. Now, I want to read another article from The Atlantic. Ooh, whoa. Okay, let's go back to the top. So The Atlantic, titled "There's No Such Thing as Free Will." It's based actually on the same experiments. So it's a really interesting read. If you want to read it, just search "Is There Free Will? The Atlantic," and it'll probably pop up first on Google. So basically it says this: are our actions the unfolding effects of our genetics, or the outcome of what has been imprinted on us by the environment? Impressive evidence accumulated for the importance of each factor. Whether scientists support one, the other, or a mix of both, they increasingly assumed that our deeds must be determined by something. Right? So this goes back to last week's session, nature versus nurture. Is it our genetics? Is it how we're programmed? What we've inherited from our parents, and that's our DNA, and that holds in it information of our future behavior? Is it that? Or is it perhaps what's imprinted on us by the environment, as they write here? So they say it's kind of both, but let's keep reading. So in recent decades, research on the inner workings of the brain has helped to resolve the nature-nurture debate. That's that same debate on nature meaning genetics and nurture meaning environment, and has dealt a further blow to the idea of free will. Brain scanners have enabled us to peer inside a living person's skull, revealing intricate networks of neurons and allowing scientists to reach broad agreement that these networks are shaped by both genes and environment. Okay, till here, that's good. But there is also agreement in the scientific community that the firing of neurons determines not just some or most, but all of our thoughts, hopes, memories, and dreams. So these neurons firing determine everything we basically are. Let's keep reading. Many scientists say that the American psychologist Benjamin Libet demonstrated in the 80s, that's the original experiment, that we have no free will. It was already known that electrical activity builds up in a person's brain before she, for example, moves her hand. Libet showed that this buildup occurs before a person consciously makes a decision to move. The conscious experience of deciding to act, which we usually associate with free will, appears to be an add-on, a post hoc reconstruction of events that occurred after the brain has already set the act in motion. So that sensation of free will is simply an illusion. The 20th century nature-nurture debate prepared us to think of ourselves as shaped by influences beyond our control. But it left some room, at least in the popular imagination, for the possibility that we could overcome our circumstances or our genes to become the author of our own destiny. I guess you know where this is going. The challenge posed by neuroscience is more radical. It describes the brain as a physical system like any other and suggests that we no more will it to operate in a particular way than we will our heart to beat. So no one has any question that our heart has free choice to keep beating, right? It's clear that it follows some kind of mechanism, an algorithm, a program which makes it beat, correct? So basically what they're saying is that our actions, our thoughts, and even before they mentioned our dreams, everything we are has no more will in it to operate than our heart to beat. The contemporary scientific image of human behavior is one of neurons firing, causing other neurons to fire, causing our thoughts and deeds in an unbroken chain that stretches back to our birth and beyond. In principle, we are therefore completely predictable. If, and this is crazy, listen to this, if we could understand any individual's brain architecture and chemistry well enough, we could, in theory, predict that individual's response to any given stimulus with 100% accuracy. This is insane. Basically, it means that this illusion of freedom of choice, the reason why we can't predetermine a certain action is because there is such a complex architecture and chemistry going on in the brain that is a result of so many different incidents and experiences and genes all together that we just don't know how to map this. But if we theoretically could map all of these incidents, all of the brain architecture, all of the chemistry in our brain, we could predict every single action with 100% accuracy. So that's crazy. So I already see some questions asking about this text. Again, I'm reading from an article posted in The Atlantic. I'm sure if you Google the title, There's No Such Thing as Free Will, The Atlantic, I'm sure you'll find it. It's a much longer read and it's fascinating. So you can just probably search it on Google and you can find it. So let's recap what we just read, because it is really, it's crazy to think about it. I mean, you might understand it now, but to really comprehend this and to really let it sink in, I think people prefer to actually not let it sink in because it poses difficult questions and it poses moral questions and existential questions. So what am I, a robot? What's all this for? I have no choice. I can do anything I want. And I think people that I've spoken with about this topic to quite a lot of people, and sometimes I see that the natural response is just to kind of block it off because, you know, it's better not to know that. It's better unless you have an idea of a point of free will. And that's actually what we're going to talk about today. There is. So far, is there free will? Science says no. Kabbalah, on the other hand, says yes. But we're going to know where. So hopefully you haven't kind of blocked this and you're open. And in the article, it's interesting. It keeps going there about people. They keep doing experiments, and people who read about these experiments and then they're put in moral situations and tested, they act less morally. And people who don't get exposed to these experiments, they act with better morals. So they cheat less. One was with an exam of cheating, I think. And they saw that just this knowledge of being exposed to the idea that we're not free, that everything is predetermined, that we're simply a result of this algorithm, of this mechanism, of our chemistry, of our architecture, demotivates people to take action and take responsibility for their lives. So it is pretty crazy to think about it. Post your comments in the chat. I forgot to say in the beginning, I usually say that if you like these sessions, don't forget to click the like button, the share button, the subscribe button, because that just helps more people find these materials. So please do that if you enjoyed these sessions. I would personally appreciate it. Now when you click the button, someone knows, your brain knows before you do if you are going to click that button now. So you might be thinking, wait, so now I'm going to click it? Wait a minute, but then I'm going to trick him. I'm not going to click it, or I am going to click it. But no matter what you do, there is some internal mechanism that already knows the answer before you're consciously aware of it. So no freedom there. At least we know where we don't have freedom. All these choices, all these things, not free. All right, so hopefully you really want to know already what Kabbalah says about this, because like I said, according to recent scientific findings, we don't have free will. So we're going to go back 100 years, back in time, to an article written by Baal HaSulam, a great Kabbalist of the 20th century. He wrote the interpretation of the Book of Zohar. He wrote the study of the 10 Sefirot, which describes in detail over 3,000 pages the complete structure of the spiritual world. He wrote all of that not from imagining it, but from actually attaining it, like a scientist that discovers through experimentation and through their discoveries, they document it. Similarly, that's what Kabbalists do. So Baal HaSulam did the same. And from that state of attainment, he wrote this article called The Freedom, about 100 years ago, maybe 90 years ago or 80, I'm not sure exactly. But let's see what he says here. It's quite interesting to see that this was written 100 years ago. Okay, so this is different excerpts from the article Freedom of Baal HaSulam. Let's read it and let's see what he's saying here. However, he's saying this: when we examine, maybe I should have maybe put that dot on. Maybe that's help. Does that help? However, when we examine the acts of an individual, we shall find them compulsory. He is compelled to do them and has no freedom of choice. In a sense, he is like a stew cooking on a stove. It has no choice but to cook. Very similar to the heartbeat example of that article written in Nature recently. And it must cook because nature has harnessed life with two chains, pleasure and pain. So here, Baal HaSulam is adding something. He's adding the software through which this deterministic choice is made. So he says this: the living creatures have no freedom of choice to choose pain or reject pleasure. And man's advantage over animals is that he can aim at a remote goal, meaning to agree to a certain amount of current pain out of choice of future benefit or pleasure to be attained after some time. So basically he's describing, so scientists found that there is no kind of free choice, that the decision is made before you actually take it. But Baal HaSulam adds something more here. He says that we choose according to a simple mechanism, that we have no freedom, he says that too, but our lack of freedom is to choose always pleasure over pain. That's our mechanism. Let's keep reading. But in fact, there is no more than a seemingly commercial calculation here, where the future benefit or pleasure seems preferable and advantageous to the agony that they are suffering from the pain they have agreed to assume presently. And there is only a matter of deduction here, that they deduct the pain and suffering from the anticipated pleasure, and there remains some surplus. So we're reading now from the articles Baal HaSulam, The Freedom. He describes a simple mechanism here. It is actually so simple and it makes so much sense. Basically, he's saying that every single action we take is a simple calculation. We have this like bookie inside of us that's always calculating pleasure versus pain. And future benefit or pleasure, we can go for that if the calculation ends up being that the suffering we experience to reach that future benefit is less than the pleasure we will receive, right? So I'm gonna, spend the next 2 weeks studying like crazy for an exam. I'm suffering, but I want to get a good grade. I want to pass my test. So the pleasure I perceive is greater than the pain I'm willing to endure now. And those who are not able to study, who, and I see that a lot with, teenagers who just can't sit and don't want to study for the test. Why? They just don't see the benefit. They can't imagine the benefit they'll get from passing the test, and they don't see its worthwhileness in comparison to the effort they need to invest. So it's a very simple mechanism. And you can even test it on yourself right now. Don't move. Don't move for a sec. Stay where you are. Stay still. Now you probably want to move because I said don't move, of course. But think about it. What will make you want to move right now? You can write in the chat if you want. I'll give you a few seconds. So the answer is simple. Pleasure over pain. As soon as you feel slight discomfort in the way you're sitting, you'll move to get more pleasure, less pain. And that is what will motivate you to move, right? So I'm talking with my hands. If I hold them still, I get frustrated. So I don't do it consciously, I just do it. So my mechanism is calculating, okay, move your hands, it's better, it's easier for you to communicate that way, and I'm not thinking about it, I'm just doing it instinctively. But this also goes for conscious decisions as well, seemingly conscious decisions, right? Will I do this, will I do that? Great. So we have some great, okay, I asked what will make you want to move from your seat. So a couple said a beer, beautiful, good answer. John said coffee, great. Great answers. And Jean said a desire for more pleasure. And Yanis said discomfort. Right, so exactly, all these things, a coffee, a beer, I want to, it's an internal mechanism that calculates pleasure versus pain and motivates me to take an action, like move. And even just move slightly, even just reposition myself. That tiny little action is also a result of that same mechanism, pleasure versus pain. Okay, so that's the first mechanism that Baal HaSulam adds here, and it's actually, it adds a lot to what we started with science. So science says, okay, there's no free will, it's predetermined, your decision is made before you're aware of it, and Baal HaSulam, 100 years ago almost, added this incredibly valuable piece of information that helps us understand the mechanism, not how it works, but also why, what's driving it. So a mechanism of pleasure versus pain. All right, quick look at the questions. Kuplamadin is asking, is this a theory or have they proved it? No, it's not a theory. The articles I showed you before were a result of a series of tests where they connected people to electrodes and they scanned their brain activity and they were actually able to determine a person's choice, not in theory, but in practice, before they made that choice, before they chose A over B. Scientists knew, okay, he's going to choose A now, and they were right. So there's no question about that. Let's have a look at some more questions. Having a tough time just to visually see. It's a bit small here. Let me make it a little bit bigger. Ruth, if you can also not put them in black, it makes it a bit harder to see. Thanks. Okay. Let's keep going a little bit. I see there are good questions here, but I'm going to answer some of them in a second. So, like I said, if I have an answer pre-prepared, then it's great questions. Okay, so let's keep going. Let's talk a little bit about social influence. But before we do, I want to show you some clips. What should I start with? Okay. I'll start with a question. It's an experiment. So let's say you're sitting in a room and you're working in a library or something, somewhere public, and as you walk in, you see a person working on a ladder, fixing some light bulbs or something. And then you hear a crash and a cry of that person. Most likely he fell off the ladder or something. Can you think of any circumstances, for any reason, that you would not get up and go see what happened to that mechanic, to that engineer, to that electrician? Can you think of any such scenario? Try and think about this for a second. Any scenario why you would not get up and see what's happening with him. Ask, just peek your head out. It's right outside the door, and just see, are you okay? Can you think of any such scenario? So I'll give you a few seconds to answer that. So they did an experiment, and they put, there was like some actors put in a room working in a library, and then there was one subject, meaning the person. The electrician was also an actor on the ladder. There was a big crash. There was a cry. It was all staged. It didn't really happen. They wanted to see the person's response. So let's take a look at the answer. Well, the answer is there is a circumstance that most likely all of you, or 99.9% of you, would not get up and help that person or even check what's happening with him. And it's the circumstances are actually probably not what you imagined. All right, let's take a look. Wait a minute. I hope we'll get sound. Wait a minute, let's try this one. Okay, there's no sound, so I'll be your sound. So basically, nothing. So they're just explaining the experiment. So a person sitting here, watching, working in the library, they hear a bang, loud crash, and they go and they check what's happening, obviously, right? So natural response, you'd probably all do it. Big crash, that's what happened now. Actually, maybe you guys hear sound. If you do, then let me know. But if not, I'll just keep talking. So they did the same experiment. This time, they put two actors. The guy sitting with a checked shirt is an actor, and the woman, the girl sitting here is also an actor. And this guy here with that blue sweater, he's not an actor. So they did the same experiment, and let's see what happens. So in a few seconds, there's going to be a loud crash. You'll see their faces jumping from surprise. There you go. That's the crash. And these two people, actually, sorry, my mistake. The guy in the checked shirt is not the actor, and you can see what he does. He looks at the other two actors. He sees they don't respond, and he doesn't respond. He just sits there. He looks, he hears. This is a real experiment. He looks at them. He sees how they respond to it. Basically, it's an experiment in conformity. So basically, it's that easy. If other people around you didn't respond, you most likely will not respond either. Why? That's a different question. You might think this or that, but the answer is, this is the answer. Social influence. Let's watch another clip. I promised I'm going to teach you a trick how to make kids, if you have any, your kids or your siblings or your grandkids, eat carrots and drink milk and enjoy it. So I'm going to keep that promise, and I'm going to show you now how to do it. You ready?
This is a painting known as the Supper at Emmaus. And in the 1940s, when it was thought to be painted by Johann Vermeer, it was worth millions of dollars. It was perhaps literally priceless. It was in Holland, and it was one of the most renowned paintings in Europe. People would travel through Europe to see it. Until one terrible day when it was discovered that it was not painted by Vermeer at all, but by the great forger, Van Meegeren. In other words, it was discovered it was not this painting, but that painting. And all of a sudden, its value dropped to nothing. How you taste something is critically affected by what you believe you're eating. And this shows up in all sorts of ways. One nice finding involves children. How do you get children not just to eat their carrots and drink milk, but after they have the carrots and milk, to report that they tasted good, better than your normal carrot, better than your normal glass of milk? It's actually terribly simple to do this. This was done in a study a couple of years ago. You take them out from a McDonald's bag. They get people into a brain scanner, and as they're lying on their back, there's a tube going into their mouth, and they get to drink wine through the tube while their brains are being scanned. Above them is a screen where they can read information about the wine that they're drinking. Everybody drinks the same wine. If they think they're drinking the cheap stuff, they'll report, it doesn't taste so good, and they have a low-level neural response. If they think they're drinking 200 out of a $200 bottle, they say they love it, and the pleasure centers of their brain light up like a Christmas tree. This is John Cage's work. Comes under different names, but it's often called 4 minutes, 33 seconds, because it was a famous modern performance where the pianist is instructed to sit at the piano and be silent for 4 minutes and 33 seconds. Now, as you can imagine, this is fairly controversial, whether or not this is brilliant or just ridiculous. But my favorite fact about this is you can go onto iTunes and you can buy for $1.99 the entire thing of 4 minutes 33 seconds, which is of course silent. And I've read commentaries on this where people are outraged. They say, look, just turn down the volume of your computer and sit there for 4 minutes 33 seconds. But psychologically, I think that wouldn't be the same silence. This is that silence from that performance.
That one cracks me up every time, that 4 minutes and 33 seconds on iTunes Store. Yeah. Okay, so you got the tip of how to make kids enjoy their carrots and milk, and you can probably do this with a lot of things. Just pull it out of a bag that they find attractive or tasty. Probably can be any bag. Yeah, Noah is writing the placebo versus the nocebo effect. What's interesting here is that it's not just a psychological effect that, you know, the people who were drinking the cheap wine and they were told it's expensive wine, they didn't just try and convince themselves that they enjoy it. They actually enjoyed it, and their pleasure areas in their brains, they lit up. So it didn't matter that it was $20 wine or cheap wine. They thought they were drinking really expensive wine, and they enjoyed it accordingly. So this fascinating area of social influence is basically social psychology, part of it sociology as well. There's actually another funny clip, but it needs sound. I'll see if I can figure that out in a few seconds, and if I do, then I'll show you that third clip as well. So just to take some quick questions and then we'll keep going. So first of all, someone wrote there that I'm speaking quickly. I apologize. I do that when I get excited. Also, I have a lot to cover, but I'll slow down. Okay. So Kupla Mayertin Eagle is asking, so can I use this info to get out of a speeding ticket? You can try, and this is actually why so much controversy is around this topic of free will, because then can you blame a criminal for doing their action if it's predetermined? And it brings a lot of moral dilemmas of how to relate people. Can you really blame a criminal that was maybe has a genetic prime for, say, violence, and was raised maybe in a broken family and in a violent neighborhood, and from age 5 already hung out with criminals? Can you really blame that individual for becoming a criminal? Would you or I turn out different if we grew up with the same life circumstances as that person? Maybe not. And this is where it raises difficult questions. But Kabbalah simplifies it, because Kabbalah says that none of these people have free choice. not the criminal or the altruist who gives to the society, and they also do it from the same calculation of pleasure versus pain. So some people are naturally built genetically with altruistic tendencies. So if they don't give, they feel bad. And if they do give, they feel good. So they're following the same mechanism of pleasure versus pain. Okay, so we're starting to build a picture here. So we have this let's say our nature, right? We have, where's my screen? Here it is. So we have our inborn qualities, which is basically, in the nature-nurture discussion, this is nature, genetics. We have the nurture, which is social influences, and we see how powerful they are. That whole clip of Paul Bloom and his experiments of the milk, of the wine, of that image, all of these are simply social influences. And these social influences clothe onto our genetics, and they bring out certain thoughts, actions, feelings, etc. So you could say these two things together are the input of us, of this machine called a human being. Now, what we added here is Baal HaSulam's principle of maximum pleasure with minimum effort. This is the program through which all of this input is calculated by. So with my inborn qualities, with my nature and my nurture, these social influences, they are clothed onto this software called maximum pleasure with minimum effort. So I could get different social values, and if I grew up in certain societies, I will probably value certain things. And like I said, if I grew up in criminal environments, then I might value crime. And that will clothe onto my inborn qualities. So not everyone will become a criminal. Some have tendencies to be, to be violent, and some have tendencies to be gentle. So maybe it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll become a criminal, but it means that your chances are higher. And all of that is clothed onto that algorithm, that program of maximum pleasure with minimum efforts. And that's how every decision eventually is made. And Lisa's asking, is participating today with you free will? Good question. The short answer is maybe. It depends. For some of you it might be, but not necessarily for all. And hopefully in the next 20 minutes you'll understand why. So I want to read a little bit more from Baal HaSulam in his article, The Freedom. And in this article where he describes in depth this whole matter of freedom of choice and where we do or don't have it. So it's from the same article we read before, it's a bit further into the article. So he says this: even determining the type of pleasure and benefit are entirely out of one's own free choice, but follow the will of others as they want and not he. For example, I sit, I dress, I speak, and I eat. I do all these not because I want to sit that way, or talk that way, or dress that way, or eat that way, but because others want me to sit, dress, talk, and eat that way. It all follows the desire and fancy of society, not my own free will. And this exactly describes that series of experiments Paul Bloom spoke of in that funny clip. And I think it's pretty obvious. I mean, the reason why I'm wearing this shirt is pretty much because society expects it. Beforehand, I wasn't wearing this shirt. I was wearing this one over here. But this probably wouldn't go too well. It's not suitable. It's not appropriate to teach online Kabbalah wearing like a t-shirt. So I have no choice but to put this on, right? And if we had none of these influences, I'd probably be sitting here in my PJs, which is probably what many of you are in right now. Well, depending where in the world, but I'm sure many of you that are watching this are watching it in your PJs because you can. So all of this follows like he says, the desire and fancy of society, not my own free will. And then he continues and says, furthermore, in most cases I do all these against my will, for I'd be a lot more comfortable behaving simply, without any burden. But I am chained with iron shackles in all my movements to the fancies and manners of others, which makes up the society. Very powerful words, timeless too, I think. This probably goes to any society, go through all of history and land whatever in some revolution or war, and you'll see that the people that were there, they were driven according to the values that make up society. And they too did not have freedom of choice. So let's take a quick look at some questions, and then we'll go on to the last part of the session today, answering the question, so where is the freedom? So David's asking, can we trick our own brain into believing a lie? Probably, if it follows, think of that algorithm, pleasure versus pain. Now, I challenge you to try and find an example that does not follow that. And actually, there was an episode in Friends many years ago, for those of you who know that series, where Phoebe challenged Joey, one of them, I can't remember, it was many years ago. They challenge each other to find a selfless good deed, and they don't succeed, and Phoebe ends up donating money. Anyway, I can't remember. I'm sure those of you who know this show probably remember this example. So the bottom line is also there they don't find a selfless good deed. It's all driven by this same mechanism of pleasure versus pain. So yeah, David, you can trick your brain into believing anything if you'll be able to calculate greater pleasure in believing that. That's also why many people live in denial of many things, because they have more pleasure in believing the lie than they do in the truth. Okay. Let's see what else. If we have free will, where does the Creator come in? Samuel's asking. Great question. That's what I'm going to answer in a few moments. Let's see what else. How did Baal HaSulam know this before science? So like I explained in the beginning, Baal HaSulam was a Kabbalist, the greatest Kabbalist of the generation of the previous century, the greatest Kabbalist who lived, for the last few hundreds of years, maybe from the time of the Ari approximately. And he knew this because he had an understanding, or to be more accurate, attainment of the entire system we are in. The entire system we are in is not what we see and feel and touch around us. That's nothing. That's a fraction, 0.00000% of what reality actually is, and even less. A Kabbalist is a person who attains the causal level of reality, and the world we are in now is a world of consequences. So when you rise to the causal level, you have an understanding of the entire system, of how it works. And that's where Baal HaSulam writes from. So that's hopefully answers your question, Kupla. Let's move on to the last part, the point of freedom. So this is from the same article, and this is where Baal HaSulam writes from. And here he touches upon that single point, a very narrow point, but it's still there, of freedom. So he says this: there is freedom for the will to initially choose such an environment. Such an environment he spoke about before, an environment that a person chooses that leads him to choose something that is beyond their egoistic desire. And that's what he talks about, such an environment. Because as long as we're choosing always between that simple pain versus pleasure algorithm, we're always choosing according to reception or greater reception. That's our only decision-making process. So it's not free choice because I'm choosing between pleasure and pleasure, egoistic fulfillment or greater egoistic fulfillment. And in the article, and in general in Wisdom of Kabbalah, then this point of freedom opens up for the first time when a person is already satiated, feels this satiation from egoistic fulfillment. It doesn't mean that you throw them aside or that you stop enjoying yourself in this world. Not at all. Kabbalists can eat delicious food and enjoy themselves and go on vacation and do fun things in this world. But they're interacting with reality differently. They're doing it on a corporeal level, while in parallel they're pursuing something that is much, much deeper and more meaningful, which also influences any interaction they have on material fulfillments, such as food, etc. And when that point opens up in a person, for the first time, and we spoke about this in previous sessions as well, it's that point of satiation from egoistic fulfillment. It's that feeling that there has to be something more to my life, the world around me, humanity as well, that this can't be it. We can't be just going into this dead end, into this, wars and viruses and etc. There has to be some kind of purpose to it. All those feelings, they come from that causal level of reality that I described, and they awaken in a person at different points in time. Not everyone has this point awakened equally. And when that point awakens, that's why it's the point of freedom. That is the first time a person actually is choosing between egoistic fulfillment and, let's call it for a second, a fulfillment on a higher level, one that in its essence is altruistic, is of bestowal, of love, of true love, not egoistic love, that I love something because it gives me pleasure. Like I love fish because they're tasty, but do I really love fish? No, because I then wouldn't kill and eat them. So that's egoistic love. No, so we're talking here about a different level of love, one that is beyond everything we're familiar with in this world, everything we know. We only feel that it exists to a certain point. And that's this point Baal HaSulam speaks of. That's this environment that he talks of here. So let's read it again with that in mind. So he says this: there is freedom for the will to initially choose such an environment, such books and such guides that impart to him good concepts. If one does not do that, but is willing to enter any environment that appears to him, meaning any egoistic environment that leads him to egoistic drives and fulfillments, in consequence, he'll be forced into foul concepts that make him sin and condemn. He will certainly be punished, but not because of his evil thoughts or deeds, in which he has no choice, but because he did not choose to be in a good environment. For in that there is definitely a choice. So choosing between corporeality, between materialistic fulfillment and spirituality, even if you don't exactly know what spirituality is, even if you're not completely sure. But this choice between these two things is the first point of freedom. So answering the question before, what was it? Is us watching this session free will? So it depends. If you randomly came across this and just keep flicking, maybe there you also had a point of free will and you didn't realize it towards what he calls this good environment, because there is no coincidence. If you're watching this now, even if you've never heard of any of this before, and many of you I know who watch these shows just by chance came across this, by coincidence. Of course, there is no coincidence. Everything is leading towards a higher level of human evolution, of human emergence. And if you came across this video, then it means that you are facing, for the first time, not just in your life, but in all of your lifetimes, in all of your reincarnations, in the 14 billions of years of your existence, meaning the existence of your substance, from the beginning of the thought of everything that existed, then when this point awakens, and if you're watching this, then there's a good chance that this lit up now, then you're facing this choice, choosing between reception and bestowal, ego and love, self-fulfillment, or I don't want to say words that will be misinterpreted, but let's call it altruism, although altruism doesn't really reflect it. It's kind of, it's being this conduit of light, let's call it that. That's much more accurate. So when this opens up, you have this point of freedom. And then Baal HaSulam continues, and he says, therefore, he who strives to continually choose a better environment is worthy of praise and reward. Because even if you come to an environment, let's take this video as an example, so you're here and you chose to stay, but what are you going to do next? Are you going to kind of keep scrolling and watch a cat video, which is also fine, by the way. Again, Kabbalah doesn't say that you need to kind of restrict yourselves and your pleasures. No, it just says on top of that you need to add something more. So are you going to watch just cat videos, or are you going to see some cat videos and then go back to something more meaningful? So he says, but here too it is not because of his good thoughts and deeds, which come to him without his choice, but because of his efforts to acquire a good environment, which brings him these good thoughts and deeds. So there it is, the point of freedom, written by Baal HaSulam around the 1930s and 40s. If you want to read the full article, you can Google, maybe Rachel, if you can post the link to the article, that would probably be more helpful. The article, The Freedom of Baal HaSulam. He also breaks down, by the way, the 4 factors that determine nature and nurture. He does it beautifully. He talks about the genetics and external influences. He divides it up into 4 different factors. So that's also a recommended read. In general, I recommend that you read this article even a few times. I remember when I first read it, I was completely blown away. I read it, I'm not exaggerating, maybe, 50 times, again and again and again, trying to understand this point, to identify where it is, to feel it inside myself. But that's where it is. So just a quick recap. Science says that our conscious decisions are actually made before we're consciously aware. Baal HaSulam says that these decisions are determined by an algorithm of pleasure versus pain. Baal HaSulam continues, and so does social psychology today, that we're completely social beings. We're influenced by our surroundings, by our environment. And then we reach the final point of freedom, which is the first time this point awakens inside a person, which poses a real choice between reception and bestowal. And until then, it's always reception and reception, so there is no choice there. And if you're watching it and you feel it now, then you know what I'm talking about. And if, take an exercise for the upcoming week. Try and identify, maybe you have this little urge to open up our YouTube channel, watch another video, right? Try and examine that feeling that awakens in you. And if you decide to go ahead and watch a video or read something, see how you feel when doing that, right? See how it influences your day. In what way? So this point of freedom is a point of choice between reception and bestowal, between ego and light. You could put it that way. And if you already kind of, seen a few of these sessions and you want to know where you can join such an environment, then of course you can join KabU. I'm sure many of you are familiar with KabU. KabU is our online learning platform. I identify many of the names here in the chats of our students who are in KabU. And that's an environment of people who have this point awakened in them, and they want to start nurturing it. They want to start growing it. And as it grows, you'll identify every time greater opportunities and greater potential of fulfillment, but on a different level of fulfillment. Not of fleeting pleasures like egoistic desires are of food, of sex, etc., but of pleasures on a different kind of level. Because if you act as this conduit, this transition, this passage of light, then even though your intention is not to receive for yourself, like the egoistic intention, but to let it flow through you, you still have this infinite force of power flowing through you. And that brings an energy that you can't imagine. So I can still see a lot of questions here. Unfortunately, we won't have time to answer them, but I will be looking at the chats after the session and answering there. So it was great to be here with you on YouTube and on Facebook and all of our viewers. Please, if you enjoyed it, subscribe to our channel, share it with friends who you think might be interested in this. And stay tuned, because in 3 minutes, we'll be starting another live broadcast, The Great Transition, with Asaf, Joseph and Seth, talking about the transition the whole world is in today. So I highly recommend you just stay tuned in wherever you are, Facebook or YouTube, all good. And that's it. So I'm Gil Shear. This was Kabbalah Explained Simply. And today we answered the question of freedom of choice. Do we have free will? So science says no, but Kabbalah says yes, but you got to know where to look. So it was great to be here. See you guys later.